On the day of my daughter's graduation, her words shattered me more than any sleepless night ever could. I still remember the first night I took on my second job. The sun had already disappeared behind the skyline, and while most parents were coming home to have dinner with their families, I was rushing from the factory to the gas station, still wearing the smell of metal and oil on my clothes. I kept telling myself it was worth it, that every extra hour, every shift I forced my body through was not for me but for her. My daughter was only a little girl back then, falling asleep with her textbooks on her chest, dreaming of a life I swore she would have. While I carried boxes and pumped gas, I imagined her in a cap and gown, walking proudly across a stage, and I thought, one day, this will all make sense. The exhaustion became a second skin. My days blurred together. Early mornings in one uniform, late nights in another, and weekends barely existed for me. People often asked how I managed to stay awake, how I could survive on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, but I never told them the truth. I didn't survive it, I endured it. My muscles screamed, my back ached, and sometimes I would close my eyes while standing, just to steal a second of rest. But every time her face appeared in my mind, every time I pictured her smile, I found fuel inside me I didn't know existed. I wasn't working for luxuries, not for vacations or a bigger house. I was working for her future, so she would never have to feel the chains of poverty like I did. The third job came almost by accident. The bills had piled up higher than I expected. Tuition was more expensive than I ever dreamed, and the first 2 jobs were just not enough. So I started delivering newspapers at dawn. It meant waking up when the world was still sleeping, my hands freezing as I tossed papers onto porches, then running straight into my first shift. I stopped eating regular meals, sometimes skipping days just to stretch the money a little further. My body broke down little by little, but my spirit held on because I believed I was building something unshakable for her. At times, I wondered if she even noticed. Did she see me stumbling through the door at night, collapsing on the couch before even saying goodnight? Or was I already invisible in her world of books, friends, and dreams? I tried to be present, even in absence. I would leave little notes on the fridge before heading out at dawn. Good luck on your test today, or I'm proud of you. She rarely responded, but I told myself teenagers are like that, too busy to notice the quiet sacrifices of a parent. Still, I held on to the thought that one day, when the stage lights shone on her, when the world finally recognized her achievement, she would look for me in the crowd and understand. She would know that every sleepless night, every coin I scraped together was for her. That thought was my anchor, keeping me from drifting into despair. There were nights when the silence of my room was deafening. I would come home so late that even the neighbors' lights were out, and I'd sit alone in the dark, my body trembling from fatigue. Sometimes I questioned myself, was I a good father, or just a ghost in her life? My hands bore the scars of labor, my eyes carried the weight of years of exhaustion, but my heart always whispered, she will see. One day, she will see. That whisper became my lullaby, the only thing that put me to sleep when the world felt colder than ever. Her graduation day was the lighthouse I kept sailing toward. For years I pictured it, the applause, the cheers, the moment her name was called. I saw myself in the crowd, my chest swelling with pride, tears filling my eyes, clapping harder than anyone else. That day was supposed to be the reward for all the invisible wars I fought alone. It was the moment I could finally breathe and say, it was worth it. I ironed my shirt the night before, polished my old shoes, and despite the exhaustion weighing on my bones, I stood tall, ready to witness the culmination of everything I had sacrificed. The ceremony was as beautiful as I imagined. The auditorium echoed with joy, families cheering, cameras flashing, flowers filling the air with their fragrance. I spotted her on stage, radiant in her gown, her smile brighter than I had ever seen. My heart swelled. In that instant, every bruise, every sleepless night, every tear shed in private seemed small compared to the pride burning inside me. I clapped until my hands stung, my voice hoarse from cheering her name. For a fleeting moment, I believed the universe had finally repaid me in full. Then came the speeches. One by one, students took the microphone to thank their families, their friends, their mentors. My daughter stepped up, her voice clear and confident. I leaned forward, holding my breath, waiting for the words I had dreamed of hearing for so long. She thanked her professors, her classmates, her best friend, who stayed up late studying with her. She thanked her grandmother for her prayers, her uncle for his advice, even her neighbor for always encouraging her. And then she stopped. She smiled, waved, and stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. My world collapsed in silence. I sat frozen, clapping mechanically, while inside me something shattered beyond repair. She hadn't said my name, not even once. The man who worked 3 jobs, who gave up his health, his sleep, his entire life to make this day possible, was invisible. I forced a smile, pretending for the world that I was proud and happy, but inside I was screaming. My chest felt hollow, my sacrifice erased in a single breath. I wanted to stand up, to shout, it was me, I carried you here, but I swallowed it, because fathers are supposed to be strong, silent, unshaken. That night, when I returned to my empty room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my calloused hands. Hands that had built her future, hands that had broken so she could rise. And yet, in the most important moment of her life, those hands didn't exist to her. I told myself it didn't matter, that her success was my success, that love doesn't always need acknowledgement. But in the silence of that night, I finally admitted the truth. Sometimes love does need to be seen. Sometimes sacrifice deserves a name, and mine was never spoken. The applause roared in my ears, but inside me there was only silence. I sat there, clapping like everyone else, my palms stinging, but my heart numb. I had waited years, decades for that moment, believing it would heal every scar left by my sacrifices. Yet as her words floated across the auditorium, I realized I had been erased from her story. I wasn't the father who bled for her dreams. I was just another face in the crowd. My chest tightened and I struggled to breathe, as if the weight of every sleepless night had suddenly collapsed onto my ribs all at once. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that the important thing was her happiness, her future, her success, but the truth cut deeper than any lie could cover. I felt betrayed, not by her achievements, but by her silence. All those nights I worked under fluorescent lights, all those mornings I dragged my body out of bed before dawn, all those moments when hunger gnawed at me, but I pushed forward anyway. They had all been invisible. I had been invisible. I sat there among parents who were being celebrated, who were hugged and kissed, while my heart ached for even a single acknowledgement. My hands shook as I clapped, not from joy, but from rage, suppressed beneath layers of love. I wanted to run out of the auditorium, to escape the humiliation burning my skin, yet something stronger kept me glued to the seat. Pride and pain tangled together, fighting for dominance. I kept my eyes on her, my daughter, the very reason I had destroyed myself piece by piece. She stood there smiling, waving at the crowd, oblivious to the storm inside my chest. And in that moment, I realized she didn't know the price of her success. She didn't know she had walked across that stage on my broken back. The moment she left the stage, families rushed to their children, wrapping them in embraces, showering them with flowers, and snapping endless photos. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, my body heavier than it had ever been. I wanted to walk toward her, to congratulate her, to whisper that I loved her, but I froze. I didn't know if my voice would hold steady, or if it would crack under the weight of everything unspoken. I watched from a distance as she hugged her grandmother, laughed with her friends, and posed for pictures. I was just a shadow at the edge of her triumph, unseen and unneeded. Inside, something snapped. Her voice I had buried for years screamed, "Say it, tell her what you gave up." But another voice whispered back, "No, let her have this moment." I was torn between the urge to demand recognition and the instinct to protect her joy. That conflict ripped me apart. Every tear I held back became heavier. Every smile I faked more unbearable. For the first time in my life, I wondered if all my sacrifices had been a mistake. If love, when unseen, could really sustain itself forever. I left the crowd and walked outside, the cheers echoing behind me like cruel reminders. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and crimson, colors that should have felt victorious but only deepened my despair. I leaned against the wall, my chest heaving, my eyes burning with tears I refused to shed. Fathers passed by me holding bouquets, their children clinging to them with gratitude. And there I stood, empty-handed, empty-hearted, wondering what it meant to be a father if not to be remembered. I replayed her speech over and over in my mind, each word a blade. She thanked everyone but me, everyone, and I kept asking myself, was I such a terrible father that she forgot me? Or was I so consumed by work, so absent from her life, that in her eyes my sacrifices had never been love but just absence? The thought crushed me. Maybe I hadn't been invisible by accident. Maybe I had made myself invisible, too lost in survival to show her the man behind the exhaustion. But then another memory surfaced, her little voice years ago when she was only 5, tugging at my sleeve. "Daddy, promise you'll always be here." And I had promised. I had promised with every ounce of truth in me, even though I knew my jobs would steal me away. I had kept that promise in the only way I knew how, not by being present, but by building her future. And now, standing outside her graduation, I wondered if she even remembered that promise, or if she believed I had broken it. I clenched my fists, feeling the rough skin of my palms, the scars from years of labor. These hands had carried her future, had built the foundation she stood on, but they were trembling, useless, desperate for her acknowledgement. I wanted to run to her, to grab her shoulders and shout, "I did this for you. Every piece of me, every drop of sweat, every broken bone, it was all for you." But I stayed rooted, swallowed by fear, by pride, by love, twisted into silence. Fathers aren't supposed to beg for gratitude. Fathers are supposed to endure. As the night deepened, I stood alone in the shadows, watching her laugh, surrounded by love that didn't include me. And I realized the cruelest pain wasn't the exhaustion, the hunger, the loneliness. The cruelest pain was being forgotten. The cruelest pain was realizing that the greatest sacrifice of my life might never even be seen. And that truth, sharper than any blade, carved into my heart as the day that was supposed to be my redemption became the day I broke. When the ceremony ended and the crowd began to thin, I lingered at the edge, my feet heavy, my soul heavier. I watched her surrounded by friends, each of them radiant with pride, parents lifting cameras to capture every smile. I wanted to leave, to disappear into the night and carry my broken heart where no one could see it. But something inside me refused. I had come too far, bled too much to vanish quietly. Even if she hadn't spoken my name, even if I remained a ghost, I needed to see her one more time. I approached slowly, each step a war. My body trembled with exhaustion, but my heart pounded with something sharper than fatigue. Fear. Fear that if I spoke, my voice would betray the hurt inside me. Fear that if she looked at me, she would see the disappointment I had fought so hard to bury. Yet when her eyes finally met mine across the courtyard, they lit up, if only for a second. "Dad!" she called, rushing toward me. For that fleeting moment, I wasn't invisible. She hugged me quickly, almost distractedly, the way young adults do when caught between two worlds, their families and their new lives. "Did you see me? Did you hear my speech?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. My throat closed. I forced a smile and nodded, though her words replayed in my head like a cruel echo. I wanted to tell her I had heard every syllable, every name but mine. Instead, I whispered, "You were perfect," and she believed me. As the crowd moved on, she returned to her friends, laughing again, leaving me in the shadow of her joy. I stood there, trying to steady my breathing, when an older woman approached. Her teacher, I assumed. She placed a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "You must be so proud. She always talked about how hard you worked. She told us you had 3 jobs. For a moment, the world stopped. My daughter had spoken of me after all, not on stage, not to the world, but in smaller, quieter spaces I had never seen. I felt a strange warmth spread through me, a crack of light in the darkness. Maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe she had simply chosen not to reveal everything under the bright lights, where pride and embarrassment mix in complicated ways. Maybe, in her own way, she had carried me with her onto that stage, even if she didn't speak my name aloud. That thought didn't erase the pain, but it softened the edges. Later that night, when the celebration quieted, I found her sitting on the steps outside, still in her gown, her cap tilted in her hands. I sat beside her, the silence between us heavy, but not hostile. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The stars above blinked faintly, as if waiting for the words I had carried for years. Finally, I broke the silence. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice low, steady, but trembling inside. She turned to me, her eyes softer now, stripped of the performance she had given the world. "Dad, I know what you did. I know you worked yourself to the bone. I didn't say it out there, but..." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hands together. "I carry it with me every day. Every page I read, every exam I passed, I thought of you. I didn't say it in front of them because I don't even know why. Maybe I thought it would sound like weakness. Maybe I was afraid I'd cry. But Dad, I know. I know it was you." Her words pierced me deeper than her silence had. For years I had begged the universe for recognition, a single acknowledgement, and here it was. Private, fragile, but real. Tears filled my eyes, and I couldn't stop them this time. They rolled down my cheeks, carrying with them the weight of decades. She reached for my hand, her soft fingers intertwining with my scarred, calloused ones. In that touch, I felt something I had long forgotten. Connection. We sat there for what felt like hours. No more speeches, no more applause, just the two of us and the quiet truth between us. She leaned her head on my shoulder, whispering, "I'll spend my whole life trying to honor what you gave me." And in that moment, the pain inside me didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became something bearable, something worth carrying. Because now it wasn't just mine. She carried it too. I realized then that love is rarely recognized in the ways we imagine. It doesn't always come with public gratitude or grand declarations. Sometimes it hides in private words, in quiet acknowledgments, in the eyes of the one you sacrificed everything for. I had wanted the world to know my name, to hear her say it in front of strangers. But maybe the only thing that mattered was that she knew. That night, as we walked home together, her gown swaying in the evening breeze, I felt lighter than I had in years. The streets looked the same, the cracks in the pavement, the broken lamps, the weary buildings, but something inside me had shifted. I was still tired, still scarred, but I was no longer invisible. In the days that followed, I returned to work, because life never stops demanding. But each shift felt different now. The fatigue was still there, but beneath it, a new strength had taken root. For the first time, I worked not out of desperation, but out of pride. Because I wasn't just building a future anymore. I was witnessing it unfold before my eyes. Every coin I earned, every ache in my back, every bruise on my hands, it all carried new meaning. It wasn't invisible labor anymore. It was love she recognized, even if the world never would. And for me, that was enough. The days after her graduation felt quieter, though not because the world had changed. The factory machines still roared, the gas station lights still buzzed, and the morning air still bit into my skin as I tossed newspapers onto empty porches. What changed was me. For years I had carried my burden in silence, convinced it was invisible, meaningless if unspoken. But now, even if her words on that stage had not been for me, I carried the memory of her whisper on the steps, the confession she had saved just for us. It was small, private, but powerful enough to rebuild a man who had been breaking for far too long. I began to notice the little things again, the way the sunrise painted the streets gold as I delivered papers, the way my daughter, now a graduate, sometimes left notes for me. Simple words like drive safe or dinner's in the fridge. They were small gestures, yet they were acknowledgements, proof that I existed in her world, proof that I mattered. I had spent so many years waiting for one grand gesture of gratitude, only to realize that love often hides in whispers, not shouts. Still, the wound of that speech lingered. Some nights, when I closed my eyes, I replayed it all over again. The applause, her smile, the names she listed, and the silence where mine should have been. It hurt, even after her private confession. But maybe that's the nature of sacrifice. It doesn't always receive the recognition it deserves. Sometimes love is thankless. Sometimes it's a shadow, and yet, even in the shadows, it shapes the light. I started speaking to her more, not about work, not about exhaustion, but about memories. I told her stories of her childhood, of nights when she was sick and I stayed awake holding her hand, even when I had to work the next morning. I reminded her of the promises I made, promises she may have forgotten, but promises I never broke. And I saw in her eyes a new understanding, a weight of awareness that hadn't been there before. She was beginning to see the man behind the labor, not just the labor itself. As weeks turned into months, our bond grew in ways I hadn't dared hope. She began asking me questions about my life, my dreams, my regrets, questions no one had asked me in years. I realized she didn't just see me as a provider anymore. She saw me as a person. That shift healed wounds I didn't even know were still open. For the first time, I wasn't just her father in the background of her success. I was her father in the story she was now choosing to write. Yet, I also learned a truth I wish I had understood earlier. Waiting for recognition will only poison the heart. If you sacrifice only for acknowledgement, you will bleed endlessly. The real strength is in giving without expecting, in loving without demanding repayment. I wish I had learned that before bitterness took root in me. But maybe the lesson still came in time, because now I carry it with me lighter than before. I began sharing this lesson with others, in small conversations at work, with strangers at the bus stop, even with younger fathers at the gas station. I told them, don't wait for a thank you to validate your love. It may never come the way you expect. Give anyway, love anyway. And as I spoke those words, I realized I was finally healing. The silence I once hated had become a teacher. My daughter, too, began to change. One night she handed me a letter, folded and sealed, asking me not to read it until I was alone. When I did, my hands trembled. It was a thank you. Raw, honest, filled with details I thought she had never noticed. She remembered the nights I came home smelling of gasoline, the mornings when my hands were covered in grease, the empty chair at dinner but the full fridge. She remembered, even if she never said it then. That letter became the most precious thing I had ever held. I kept it in my wallet, close to my heart. On the darkest nights, when exhaustion returned like an old enemy, I took it out and read it again, letting her words remind me that love, though quiet, had always been there. And slowly I stopped feeling like a ghost. I stopped feeling erased. I began to believe that even sacrifices left unspoken still shape the lives of those we love. Looking back, I realized the graduation wasn't the betrayal I thought it was. It was the turning point. It forced the truth into the open, forced me to confront the silence between us, forced her to see me in ways she hadn't before. Without that pain, perhaps we would have stayed stuck in the cycle of absence and assumption. Perhaps we would never have spoken the words that needed to be said. Sometimes heartbreak is the only way to carve space for healing. And now, whenever I see her, studying late into the night for her next chapter, or laughing on the phone with friends, or even just walking into the kitchen with tired eyes but a grateful smile, I see not only the woman she has become, but the bond we rebuilt. A bond made not of speeches or applause, but of truth, pain, and resilience. So if you ask me now, was it worth it? The sleepless nights, the broken body, the hunger, the invisibility? Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because love, even unspoken, is never wasted. Because every sacrifice built a bridge that she now walks upon. Because even if the world never knows my name, my daughter does, and that is enough. And maybe that is the message I want to leave behind, not just for her but for anyone who has ever felt unseen in their love. Don't measure your worth by the gratitude you receive. Don't let silence convince you that your sacrifices mean nothing. Love is not a transaction. It is a seed. It may take years to bloom, it may bloom in secret, but one day it will grow. To every parent working double shifts, to every child trying to understand the weight carried for them, to every person who feels invisible in their devotion, I want you to know this: your love matters. Even if unspoken, it leaves fingerprints on the hearts of those you protect. Even if forgotten, it shapes futures in ways you cannot yet see. Even if unnamed, it is never lost. I once thought my daughter's silence erased me. Now I know it didn't. My sacrifices lived inside her, even when her words failed. And when she finally spoke to me, when she finally let me see that she knew, I understood something I had been blind to for years. Love doesn't need an audience, it only needs truth. So here I stand, no longer broken, but rebuilt by the very silence that once crushed me. My scars remain, but they no longer feel like chains. They feel like proof. Proof that I endured, proof that I gave, proof that I loved, and that love, whether spoken or silent, is my legacy. To anyone listening, don't wait for the perfect thank you. Don't wait for the applause. Don't wait for your name to be spoken aloud, because the truest love will always live beyond words. And to my daughter, if she ever reads this, I want her to know I forgive the silence. I forgive the stage, because in the end, she did see me, and that is enough. So here is my call to you, whoever you are. If you still have the chance, thank the ones who sacrificed for you. Don't wait until it's too late. Speak their names, honor their labor, acknowledge their love, because sometimes that's all a heart needs to keep beating. Love loudly if you can. But even if you can't, remember this: even silent love has the power to change the world.